Look at what I have here. Here's another exhibit.
Look at that. I love that. Thank you.
So when we speak to authors, Zena, we read their books. We read their books. We check out their interviews. We try to find out about them. Because, well, one, it's something that we need to do in the course of our work. We need to read, and we just really enjoyed you as a writer. And we always know there's a couple unwritten chapters. So I think if you and I conduct ourselves well, we'll get a couple of unwritten, sentences or paragraphs that never made the cut, or you've thought of since. But there's so many things in here. I had an interesting time trying to keep track of how did I want to go through them and how did I want to bring them up. The truth is, people should just buy the book and read it. It's very reader friendly. The subtitle is a productivity book for people with no time for productivity books. But its organization is commendable, by the way. We read a lot of business nonfiction, and organization isn't one of the strengths of that category. So thanks for writing a book well.
Thank you. Do you know, I just wanted to write something that people would actually read, and maybe read a couple of times and get, and I don't think, you and I know there's nothing in there that's particularly new or particularly, particularly thoughtful in a way. And a lot of the leadership thinkers that I follow are all US based. Been to MIT a couple of times. You've got all that, but I just thought, we know all this, but why is everybody still so overwhelmed? So I actually wanted to have something that was, maybe would sink in. That's what I wanted to talk to you about, actually, because whenever I do these podcasts, I think, I must come up with something really clever and different that no one said before. But actually, people still have too many internal meetings. They're totally tech-centric, aren't they? So their day is dictated by their emails, not by their problems. They can't say no, they're too nice, and we're just overwhelmed with time. So I don't think I've solved the problem, but I wanted to write something that people would read like it was a novel. And I wanted to write it like I spoke, so without swearing too much.
I'll ask you one or two things about yourself, and then I've decided, based on what you just said, I'll go backwards through the ideas that I've plotted, because okay. there's at least one idea, if you'll indulge me, Zena, that I think is you taking a stance on something that's a little controversial, and I think it's fresh. I align with you, but I don't think that we're going to have all amens on that one. But you're a reader. I mean, this became apparent. I don't think you were trying to show it off, but the range of sources that come to bear inside this book include some extremely well-known ancient philosophers, some less well-known ancient philosophers, some sort of late 20th century philosophers. Some you took a a bit of expensive in time and money set of courses around organizational psychology. So you're bringing a lot of stuff to bear. How do you tell us about how you read? We know a bit about how you write now, but how do you keep all this information coming through you and then curated like this?
That's very nice of you to say so. Well, I just am a big reader, and what can I say? So I'm a coach, and a lot of coaching, as you know, is founded in Stoic philosophy. So that's where I became interested in that. My real interest is history of art, actually, because art tells you a lot about people and culture and what's the context at the time. And so it all feeds in, actually, because in fact, I was reading at the weekend about time, that we didn't really think about the concept of time until we had railways. So the railways, particularly in the everywhere, didn't they? And it made such a difference to the developed world. But that was only when the railways came and we had to follow a railway timetable did time become an issue, and people needed to have a pocket watch because they had to catch the 4 o'clock train. until that time, it was, I'll see you in the afternoon, Kevin, and everything was fine. So that was almost the start of wonderful civilization, but also the start of all our issues today. So I guess, I am a reader. I'm a big kind of crazy reader, but fortunately I forget loads, so I have to keep topping it up. I'm that funny age. I'm interested in people, really, and all these things impact on them. So am I interested in people in performance? Yes, I am. I'm a lot more interested in people having a rich life. And I think where I come from as a coach, people aren't having a rich life, or their perception is that they're not, because they're on their iPads all the time and they're on their phones, and we're obsessed with apps. And I think we don't have the rich cultural inner lives that we should do in the developed world. This whole idea of technology bringing us lots more leisure time is completely wrong. I work with clients in corporate life who, they've got an eye on their phone while they're bathing their kids. It's just cruel. So I think that's my standpoint.
How about the workplace? This is where I think you took a stance that is not that popular today, which is to say, like it, hate it, decide you're going to go hybrid or all from home or whatever you want. But there's a couple of realities that obtained. Zena, correct me if I get this wrong, please. But employees at work, at the workplace, are at an advantage to those who are not. Say in the junior case, because they have exposure to the water cooler chat, they have, what would you say, extemporaneous kind of opportunities that come along, they get some FaceTime and so forth. So let's not pretend like, hey, if you're at home at your couch, or if you happen to be at the intern's desk, it's pretty much all a wash. It's the same. It's not.
It's not at all. No. We're seeing well-being issues because people, we're not meant to be on a screen all day. Lovely though this is, it gives us loads of advantages. But no, I completely agree with you. I'm
agreeing with you. You can't agree with me. I was doing my best to to paraphrase something that you said in the book, but I would say we are in agreement, because it's a message that through our work we see constantly. Our job, for what it's worth, is to focus on designing curriculum and courses for clients who want to organize the way they teach and learn at work. Well, guess where the teaching and learning happens? At work.
Absolutely.
And
well, all those things, and the communication. What I find with my clients is that they may be communicating well within their team, but the inter-team communication isn't so good. And that's where the workflow problems happen. So you and I might be working really well together, but somebody else over there, that's, when we're handing work over to them and they're not meeting deadlines, or we're not communicating, that's where all the problems happen. So I think the workflow is, everybody is much more siloed as a consequence of home working. Because I don't have time to say to you, Kevin, what are you guys working on and how can we work better? And we've got this problem, but you've got a take on it, let's have a chat. And that's not really happening. And we also know that it's really hard to say, we're on this call that finishes at 10. Why don't we have a chat for 15 minutes? Because you say, well, I'd love to, but I've got another call that starts at 10. As soon as this one finishes. So people are just in back-to-back meetings all the time, and they're not solving problems.
Yeah.
So but I think that the problem is that managers, leaders are not exciting enough. I could go on. Should we save it for the podcast? But I think
we're already in. It's just this has begun. This has begun.
Okay, good. Okay, now I think the problem is that clients say to me all the time, we don't know what's happening. Our teams are not taking accountability. Nobody's spotting opportunity. Nobody's fixing problems. Nobody's sharing ideas. I say, okay, well, let's talk about how you lead them. And they say, oh yeah, okay, well, we're trying to get them back in, and we're really mollycoddling these people. We've got snooker tables and we've got pizzas. They come in the office, we give them pizza. One of my clients has got a jacket potato machine. Can you imagine that? A jacket potato out of a machine?
Sorry, you have to take me back. What's a jacket potato machine?
Yeah, a baked potato.
Oh, okay.
A baked potato. So they have a machine and they get a baked potato that they then, and I suppose it's got a machine topping something. Anyway, they're just parenting these people. They've gone into, during the pandemic, they've gone into, let's really look after these people and care, and the leaders have stepped up as heroes, and which is what they were supposed to do at the time, and they've loved that. But consequently, the dynamic has changed, and they're not reverted back into, right, we're all adults, we're all professionals in our job description, let's just take some ownership. So I think consequently, people aren't seeing a reason to come in. They don't see that actually, if I come in, I've got airtime with you, Kevin, that I wouldn't really have if I was working from home. And they're not feeling that sort of sense of buzz. And sometimes they go in the office and they spend a day of virtual meetings. They're on their screens when they come in the office having meetings because, it's just all so badly planned. They don't feel that they're missing out, and they come in and they're missing their dog. Everybody here has got dogs during lockdown. So when you are in the office, there's kind of dogs everywhere. Fortunately, I love dogs, so it's fine. But I have meetings with people and they've got some big codependent Labrador on their knee. But, it's crazy. So I think that leaders, frankly, have to grow a pair. Is that politically correct to say that? Put their big boy pants on and say, right, look, come in, because we're going to do this. We're having a brainstorm, and put some energy back in.
Yes. And they need to say, you have to come on video when we're on that's not the same, but it's at least a half a step in that direction.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a thought near the end of your book, and it really stood out because there's an author named Anne Latham who we spoke to. I don't know if that's somebody you've read, but she really highlighted this same idea, which is there's no motivation. There's so sustainable and valuable as just good, steady progress.
Absolutely.
On real goals. And so all of this low nutrient bullshit about you've got your kombucha on tap is like, all right, but really just, when people sort of go away for a bit of a think, does deep call to deep when they say, oh, but that place, gives me Friday tacos or whatever? Or is it when they can see that they've actually built something, achieved something, done something, improved, and so on?
Yeah, well, you are spot on. So we know that's kind of performance 101, isn't it? That motivation comes when we feel that we're making incremental progress towards our goals. And you come in to do that because you see that's where they're being measured. I mean, I love a whiteboard. I said that in the book. I love a whiteboard. So you can actually cross things off. Everybody can see what you're doing, can see, right, Kevin, where, this isn't happening because you've got a whole big bottleneck here. What's going on? You're so good. We're dumping everything on you. You can see it, you can talk about it, and there's some sense of energy. What I find really interesting is that, I work from home because I work for myself, but I have places that I go to. I work in my clients' offices. I also have places where I go and drink coffee and work from there. So work for me, I still have workplaces, and that's a part of my identity. So I have my home, which is one place, but I think people are really missing out on having a workplace and everything that means as part of their identity. We've been saying for ages, particularly tech businesses, look, work is no longer a place, it's an output. And I don't agree with that from a well-being perspective. I think work is a team, and actually work can be a building, even if it's a communal workspace or a Starbucks, hopefully. But anyway, it's not going to coffee brands, but I think that's really missing when, young people are working from a corner of their bedroom. They really are missing out. So, and we wonder why we've got well-being issues, and we wonder why people are just doing the job, but they're not inspired and motivated because we're not enriching them. Mm-hmm. So, and like everything, it all comes down to the quality of leadership. Mm-hmm. And we have to take people who are motivated and we can inspire them. And it's very difficult to inspire over screens.
What's your perspective on the relationship between the physical space and flow? Because you talk about it, but I wanted another couple of paragraphs there because I find it so compelling as an idea. And you've just touched on it again, that you've got these different locations where maybe different kinds of work happens. But if we connect those, the physical trappings, the mechanics, the dimension, location, ambiance, the light, the temperature, the humidity, to flow.
Yeah.
What's the combination?
Well, look, for me, I mean, we know that the holy grail of getting stuff done and deep thinking is to get into flow, where you just completely absorb, like you're absorbed in a really good book, but you're absorbed in your work. And, when I was at school, they used to call this concentrating, but now we call it flow, optimum high performance and all that stuff. Whatever, it's thinking and it's not switch tasking from one task to another. So for me, and I have a middle-aged brain that can be a bit slow and forgetful. My brain, if I'm sat on my screen in my office or in my dining room like I am now, my brain is hardwired to flip from one thing to another. Where if I go somewhere differently to write something or to think about something or, to do a deep working task, I go specifically to do that. I'm prepared. If you can't, well, it's much harder to go to a different location where you're buying a coffee where maybe somebody can see over your screen and do a little bit of internet shopping and a bit of emailing your mates and a bit of, all the stuff that we honestly do during the day. Whereas I go somewhere specifically to do something, might take me 10, 15 minutes, then I get on with it. So I think place is really important because your brain isn't used to just doing, little flippy 4 or 5 minute tasks like it is somewhere else. I'm not worried about temperature. I'm not worried about noise. So everybody's different, I think. I quite like, even if I'm in a noisy cafe, once I'm in it, I'm not paying attention. And when I'm interrupted, I'm not particularly paying attention. When the waitress comes up and says, server comes up and says, can we heat that coffee up for you because you've been here for 2 hours and you've only paid for one coffee or whatever. But, and I know not everybody has the luxury of doing that, but I think it's really important to get out from where we're working. And if I have to read something, I now try and sit outdoors. Having a British summer at the moment, thank goodness it's not raining for once, but I'll go and read it in the garden just to get some vitamin D and some fresh air. And I think we've got to break up the days. But I'm not in corporate life, and I coach people who, it's really quite upsetting, can be on a screen from 7:38 in the morning till, practically till they go to bed, and they hardly get breaks. I love saying to people, what did you have for lunch? If I'm doing a group session in the afternoon, a bit of an icebreaker, what did you have for lunch? And people say, the worst I ever had was a sherbet dib dab. Do you know what that is?
No, it sounds so British.
It's a sort of it's sherbet, which is kind of very sweet, but it fizzles on your tongue. A tube of that, and you eat it off a stick of licorice. It's just got every E number.
Wow.
And this chap who's leading other people said, oh yeah, I had that. We all kind of laughed, but actually inside I found it really upsetting because I thought, well, how can you lead and look after yourself and be a role model for your team? Never mind, have a happy, long, healthy life, and think if that's the kind of lifestyle you have.
So you had suggested that a lot of the wisdom in this book is sort of copybook headings. It's things we might have seen elsewhere, and maybe it's not like transcendently new to us, but there must be some kind of a tension in that, because you're coaching people for whom I'm sure they could go through the chapter list and go, oh yes, oh yeah, and I believe in this and I totally agree with that. And yet you're trying to coach them through in a grinded out pace to overcome these things, which maybe they just seem totally obvious.
Do you know,
they can't be that obvious if they're so hard to do.
Yeah, I think that the problem is that many people have lost sight on what their priorities are. So, and that can be that they've maybe been in a role for a long time. They've accumulated other responsibilities. So maybe they were, maybe they're head of sales and now they've got marketing reporting to them and they've got some dotted lines. So their job description has really morphed and they've accumulated a lot more. And I think when people are crystal clear on what their job is and what a good job looks like, then they are much less crazy busy. So if we start tinkering in, why have you spent time on that? Because that's not the core part of your job, or somebody asked me to do it. Well, so what? They're not super important to you. They don't have most influence over your career. So let them do their own work. Why are you doing it for them, etc. You can look at all those questions further down the line. But if we spend time on the absolute clarity, crystal clear what a good job is, then people can make those micro decisions over a year, over a quarter, over a day, over an hour. Where should I focus my attention on? Everything's much simpler. But I think often those conversations are missing. If somebody is headhunted into a role, there's a big sale for them, come in and do this and do that. Nobody actually says, well, sometimes they do, but often that onboarding play is murky. So they're not saying to them, this is where you should have a laser focus for the first month. These are the big problems that could derail you. So we just spend too much time faffing around and not navigating that stuff. And again, maybe my next book should be just Big Boy Pants or something, but big gender neutral pants, because I don't think we have enough tough conversations, and again, there is a gender element in that. I think some of us try to please everybody. Some of us try and be nice. We might be organizing the summer event or something. And but actually the summer event isn't what you're measured on. So everybody might say, thank you very much indeed. You might get some lovely cards, you might get a bonus. But meanwhile, somebody else is going to get promoted because they're actually delivering the hard numbers that you're not. You're measured on GP or something. So I think sometimes, and then it's compounded by the fact that we're so tired and overwhelmed and we're not thinking clearly, and we don't have time to plan and take a step back. We're not actually just thinking, hold on a second, out of everything I do, what's the most important and what would have a domino effect on everything else if I just nail that one thing? So I think the whole time management, everybody who reads that book could run a time management session in their organization, because we all know this stuff. We know we should multitask. We know we're switch tasking. We know we've got to chunk up our tasks. We know we need to spend more time in flow, all those kinds of things. But I think it's that whole why are we doing this? What are we measured on? What's a good job? And then you think, well, actually, never mind all the guilt and everything else that comes into it. You think, well, I've done the most important thing. I've had that really difficult conversation. I fixed it. That's what I need to do. Everything else is just a bonus. So yes, I'm going to clock off at 5 o'clock today and go for a run and see my kids or whatever, because I'm then going to start energized. And sorry, this is a very long answer, but I do go on. We don't spend enough time saying to people, that project was great. Now, next time, how can we get there even quicker? That was a good meeting. We made a decision. Next Monday, when we have our meeting, how can we reach our decisions quicker, better, more effectively? It's almost like speed is a dirty word. Let's be more efficient. Let's tidy this up. Why are we doing this? Let's try and finish at 4:30 today. And I help companies see if they can get to a 4-day week. We're not adding anything in. We're just taking out everything that's superfluous.
I hadn't known that Parkinson's law was Parkinson's law. I just knew it as some kind of, workplace aphorism. So thank you for naming Parkinson's law. That is going to make its way to the Sage Frameworks Library. We're trying to make a properly curated collection of these. But that's what I hear in my ears when you say, and I think that effectively is work will expand to fill the time allotted to it, something like that.
Yeah.
That's what I hear. I can hear that echoing in my ears when I hear you say, like, what, why, when a task is finished and done well and roughly sort of good through line from start to target, isn't the question. I wonder if we could do that with less time and clock off earlier.
Yeah. But what's wrong with that? You
Yeah.
know, what is wrong with that? We've got to get rid of this whole presenteeism culture. And we are totally tech-centric, not problem-centric, not people-centric. We don't think, right, what are the problems I've got to fix this week? And when can I find time to do that? We're just thinking, well, you know, I've got a meeting, I've got a call.
Let me see if I can play devil's advocate with you on that idea. Isn't it the case that the reason that we become efficient, we make a really nice sprint to a finish and we don't clock off, is because there's another person just like us with whom we're in implicit competition. And so if we go, that's the job, it actually starts to define mediocrity. It's like, okay, so good for you, you're more efficient, you did it in 2/3 the time that you used to, but you're not competing against you yesterday, you're competing against some other, you know, guy, gal who wants the next job that you're hoping to get.
Yeah.
So you
Okay.
see those spare hours and you don't go, well, that's time for me to reflect on the isness of being as I walk around the lake. You see it as like, I'm going to do 2.5 projects in the space I used to do 1.
Yeah. Well, as my daughter would say, good for you. But what I've noticed about senior people in corporate life is they spend, I would say, a good 40% of their time managing upwards. So if you'd agree with that. And I think if you've got your head down in the weeds, sorry, my dog is just choking now. If you've got your head in the weeds, looking downwards on what project, what busy work can I do? That is not going to get you noticed. That's you operating within your job description. Whereas I think if you're smart, you'd actually walk around the lake and think, okay, what's important, all those reflective questions. Who do I need to spend time with? Who's really got influence? How can I manage upwards? How can I be more visible? Do all those things. So I think absolutely knocking off extra projects that are relatively low value just keeps you busy, but you don't get any prizes for that. You get a thank you and you're great, but that's about it. Whereas the clever people do what's really visible. They don't even bother with stuff. They really don't bother with a lot of stuff that's low value because it doesn't get noticed. They do the really important things well, and they do it visibly well.
And then they make time for headspace.
And they make time for headspace. Yeah, because we need people who can think. We need people who, we also need time with people who, or we need people to spend more time with their teams, and we need people to spend more time looking across the organization and saying, what are you guys doing there? Because we're doing this here. If we did it together, or we did it this way, we'd save ourselves much more time and have better results. That's what good people do. It's not about looking down and just crossing off tasks.
Will you just indulge those who will listen to this and say a little bit what headspace is? There's a colloquial use of headspace. It isn't what you mean. There's sort of a semi-technical definition that you bring up in the book, and I think it merits being heard.
Well, I'm very lucky that I learn from clients all the time, and I've noticed that good successful people, so whatever your definition of success is, success at work, but also lead happy lives that they find contentment in, have got more headspace. So to me, that means time to plan, time to think, time to walk around the lake and question what you're doing and why you're doing it and how well you're doing it, and to get some great ideas. It's time for development, your own development and your team development. It's much quicker to do things for other people or to do it ourselves rather than train somebody else. Coaching properly takes time. All those things. I count all of that in headspace, but it's the big differentiator between success and people who are just, you know, keeping their heads above water. So it's planning and thinking time and reflexive time, whatever you want to put that in it. What are our competitors doing? You know, what do our customers really say about us? Walking around the floor and talking to people who are, you know, 3 levels lower than you, saying, it's great that you're in this organization, welcome. What have you noticed about us compared to where you last worked? What can we do better? How can we do better for our customers? You know, that all that stuff is what I call headspace, and that will vary for different people.
There was there were a number of things that I thought were interesting ties off of Headspace, and I don't want to take liberties on it's your idea, but you did reference in the book that this could be the space where you work on fresh business opportunities or close business or see clients.
Yeah.
And we spend a lot of time focusing on business development for B2B services. So like kind of think classically law, finance, accounting, and the like.
Yeah.
Boy, is this ever true at the partner level, where it should be like tools down, go phone or have a glass of Chardonnay with a client, a real live in the wild client right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I completely agree. And again, we spend too much time on the transactional rather than also thinking, you know, where are we with clients? We've worked with them for years. You know, we are well in late marriage phase with them, and the breakup is going to start to happen because somebody else is wooing them, putting loads of effort into that business development phase. And we haven't done that. We're taking everything for granted because we're too busy doing the do's. So absolutely, I agree with you. I mean, and this is all where good, successful people should be thinking all the time. It's risk, isn't it? It's good business. And that's the big difference between, you know, really good leaders who are looking ahead and looking down the line. And again, people with their head down.
My first degree was in philosophy, so I had plenty of thanks for you for a reference to Aristotle, and I'm an Aristotle man more than a Plato man. But this idea of eudaimonia, or pursuing the good life, or the good, I think is really connected to headspace and clients. So, and your team members. So if I can just draw a few things, and I want you to correct, please, Zena, anything that I misspeak here, but headspace, I think, is that time you've referenced. It could be internal grazing, you know, pattern to go and see what's up. And I just piggybacked and said, maybe it's seeing clients. But almost certainly, if one person evinces that behavior and starts using headspace and going for the walk or having the conversations, the other people have to at least see it, but even more likely get involved in it as well. So that you engender that in them too. That's actually an Aristotelian idea, that a virtue friendship is one in which you and I both, his metaphors, that we walk together, we face the same direction, and we contemplate the world the way we find it. But it strikes me that if I'm your client, you take the headspace and you come over for a glass of wine, I actually have to have the glass of wine and occupy headspace with you too, which is really healthy for me. So there should be something contagious in the behavior.
I love that. Of course there is. Yeah. In the same that there's something very contagious about all the damaging behaviors of just
right.
All day.
Right.
And you know, just to interrupt your point, but I think that leaders have a responsibility to think, why am I getting everybody for a meeting for this? It's just an FYI, you know, it's not a decision, it's not a brainstorm, it's just me giving information. Why don't I record it, send it out as a voice note or whatever technology you want, and just say, go for a walk and listen to this for your headphones. It's 15 minutes. You know, what a nice thing that is. So that behavior is contagious too. You're dead right. Very, very nice point. Yeah.
You have a special hate for unnecessary meetings. There's a there's a little bit of vitriol that comes out, or that we can hear in your voice when you talk about useless meetings.
Well, now I don't think the glass of Chardonnay is ever useless. So I never think, because you're building relationships, aren't you? And I think there's a lot to be said for having a relationship without an agenda with a client, just to say, how are you? That's how you become a trusted advisor, isn't it?
Right.
But, I've got an agenda for this. I just want to spend time with you and find out how you are. That's lovely. That's really lovely. What I mean is those, those wretched meetings with, I probably don't even need to say it on here. Too many people around the table. There isn't an agenda. You have to have a second meeting to agree what actually you need to make a decision on, excessive collaboration, all those sorts of things. And when I look at people's diaries and I say, oh, Kevin, it's even painful just to talk about it, isn't it? But I just say, why, we talked about doing this and you haven't done it yet. I'm not their mother, they're not accountable to me. I say, well, what do you do all week? And they are just in one meeting after another. And, there's a lot of times where people are invited to a meeting and they don't know why they should be going, but they feel they should because their boss said, oh, how about you go into this? And they spend, I hear about people who are on 2-hour or even more meetings on Zoom or something. I mean, it's insane, isn't it? It's just insane, and it's cruel and it's sloppy. So yeah.
The customers that you served, are they always individuals? Do you work with groups? How are you usually engaged?
A combination of the two. I do leadership programs, so I do a lot of teamwork.
Okay. Well, that might be, I imagine in some cases, easier to wrestle down the problem of the unnecessary meetings if you get buy-in across a cohort.
Yeah, exactly. And they can all talk about it. And I mean, how lovely it is to have a meeting cancelled in your diary, don't you? Unless it's your customer you're trying to win business from or something. But when an internal meeting is cancelled, you think, oh my goodness, I've got an hour, and you can get so much little annoying field mice I talk about done, knocked off, dealt with. And, it's not uncommon for organizations to have a Friday meeting, maybe because that was a good time when they were all together to have Friday and beers and pizza, whatever it is. And then they have the same kickoff meeting on Monday, just reiterating everything they said they were going to do on Friday. So rather than actually doing it, they have that Monday morning meeting at 9 o'clock because they've always done it at 9 o'clock on a Monday. So I think it just involves some questions. Why are we doing this? Just trying to knock out a few, and then you've got your flow time, your headspace time right there, haven't you?
Yeah. You mentioned it, so let's talk antelopes and field mice. And you should know, by the way, I mean, I know it's a reference to lions, but you should know that I grew up sustenance hunting in Canada. I'm from one of those prairie families where we literally filled the freezer with whatever hapless beasts were called from the herd for us.
Okay, so should we use you as an analogy then? And apologies.
Sure.
So Kevin, you would have thought, I'm going to go after that moose, because that moose chopped up in the freezer will feed our family through the winter, and there's enough calorific intake from it to keep us going.
Right.
Rather than thinking, look, there's a cute little furry critter, and I'm going to blast it. Oh dear, it's not a nice image, is it? Because it's just not worth it. So you just would think, let it go. Whereas we spend our days not on big chunky moose that we can feed off, priority tasks. This is a clunky metaphor, isn't it? However,
we're already in.
We're up to our neck in clunky metaphors. We spend our days chasing little small things, and our brain can't distinguish the difference. So whereas, there's no value in you shooting a little field mouse, well, probably that would be an achievement because it's smaller, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. There's another animal. But, from a work perspective, my brain, I love a list. I don't even want to show you. I've got lists next to me doing this. I love crossing something off. And that could be, clean the kitchen shelves with a damp cloth, or it could be write a proposal for the work that's going to keep me going over the autumn. So my brain can't tell the difference. And I think we spend a lot of our time on small field mice, not on big moose. So, which we should do. And, you know, what time management person doesn't have an analogy for this? You know, Stephen Covey's rocks and then the, you know, the boulders, then the rocks, then the pebbles, then the sand. We've got to organize our diary around our priorities. We don't. We organize our diaries around the people that shout the loudest, I think. So, but you know, everybody knows this stuff. It's quite helpful for people to say, right, what are my antelopes, or what are my priorities, or, you know, whatever works for them. When am I going to do it? When have I actually got time to do that? And schedule it in and make a plan. But again, coming back to that first point, when I think leaders have made it absolutely clear what that North Star is, what the contribution is, the individual's contribution to it is, then they know, then it's much easier to figure out, those are my antelopes, and I can say no to those field mice and allocate their time accordingly. So what I do is, like, every morning I spend an hour or so just getting rid of small stuff first, particularly if someone's waiting for it, because that would be great irony if I was the bottleneck. So if someone's waiting for something, I do it, I get rid of it quickly, but then I try and do, you know, get into my flow as quickly as I possibly can. But it's all scheduled. It doesn't happen to chance, because otherwise it will get bumped off. And it's very easy to get sucked into emails and Teams. And, you know, Teams wasn't invented for us to use it. It's like kind of vaping products that's an epidemic with our teenagers. You know, they're not invented for us to just use them carefully. The idea is that we spend our whole day on Teams. You know, and again, we are not problem or people centric. We are tech centric. We are dictated to by what the machines tell us and how to use them. And we've got an addiction to apps as well. So how many screens, Kevin, have you got open? How many? You've got an iPad? You've got phones near you? Come on, 1, 2, just 2, 3?
There are 8 within 3 feet of my nose right now. 8 screens.
What are those screens? So there's this one.
So 3 of them are expansion screens off my laptop. Another one is a small screen connected to my camera. Here's one here. Here's one here. There's a small iPad there. 8.
Wow. You've got, what have you got on that? You've got very deep calculations or something. Are you writing in Greek, or what do you do?
These are my notes on your book.
Wow. Look at that. You do your job properly. Okay, so 8 screens.
Yeah.
And when you're watching TV in the evenings, how many screens do you have open?
I actually don't have a TV in my house.
Oh, I love that. Okay. Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's we have been learning from some of the authors that we've been speaking to, and 1 or 2 of the ideas that you've pursued, they have, in some cases, it's a core theme for them. It's a whole book. And one of them put me over the deep end, so that I'll go without my phone for Sunday.
Yeah.
Boy, is that interesting. You have to figure out how you meet people and how you take a train and a bunch of other things. Like in Singapore, the train, you need this, unless you pull out your old train card from 10 years ago and load it with cash value. So this mechanically, you're constantly herded to worship that little brick in your hand. But you can do it. And that day feels like an eternity long. I spend it, you know, with my son who's 2, and it's like I can walk to my church in the morning and back, and it's like I got transported to 1850. It's amazing. It's a true gift.
Yeah.
That is one antidote. Yeah. And there are a couple others, but your sections on the vices in our devices hit me hard.
And also time slows down, doesn't it? I mean, if you're interviewing Einstein, this is what you're talking about, is time's relative. So your time on Sunday is much slower.
Yes.
When we are, you know, we're aware of the time all the time, aren't we? So, okay, well, I might try and do that. Yeah, I might try and do that.
I want to make a jump. I want to make just a lateral leap to what your framework, your acronym for when it's just time to get something done. Shut up, Kevin. Just do it. The thing you're supposed to do it. But there's this great frame, and with your permission, we'll steal it and stick it on the frameworks library. But if you could just talk us through the pimp.
You talk about pimp, yeah. So
pimp your time, pimp your tasks.
Pimp your tasks. So usually, if you look at people's calendars, they are full of calls and meetings, but no time to actually do the work. So we give somebody a task to do, and our manufacturing colleagues, it's a very long answer, but our manufacturing colleagues, if you said to me, Zena, you're running a testing laboratory, my test tube is super important.
Yeah,
I would say absolutely, and I start that line again at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and I promise you, your test tube will be the first one I test, and so first on the line. Don't worry about it. Whereas now people just say, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. When you say, when are you actually going to do that? They don't know. They're just trying to fit it in around all their calls and all their meetings. So we have to, our grandparents would have this conversation. We have to actually allocate time to do tasks. So we pimp them. So your priority task. So it's an antelope, just mix our metaphors. It's a priority task, it's a rock, P. You insert it in your calendar, so you block out the time. So it's just like a call or a meeting, but you've actually got time to do something. It's got to be meaningful, which is the M in pimp. Otherwise, you won't do it actually, or something else more interesting or more important will come along and do it. And then the main thing is you've got to have a prompt. So we know that, don't we? You have to make it as easy as possible to do it. So I think, right, I'm finishing this call with Kevin at 11 o'clock in the morning. I'll put the kettle on, make a coffee, and then I've got the rest of that 40 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it is, to actually do something. And make it very easy for myself to go and do it. So I think, I come in the door, I'll do that, I'll do this. So whatever it is, I've got some prompt to do it, not just a calendar reminder, but I've got an event to make it easy.
Yeah.
I'm in that place. I finish that meeting, I'm going to go straight to that coffee shop. I'm going to spend an hour reading that report that I need for my next meeting, something like that. So I've got a plan around it and a prompt to do it, so I won't be derailed. So I suppose it's a way of helping people realize that time is finite, and I need to get on top of it and in control. So the very act of scheduling a task in their calendar means that it will happen, but also it gives them that sense of control. There's something called the Zeigarnik effect, which is when we've got a list and a plan to do things, but we've actually allocated time to do it, then our brain can't distinguish between a completed task and a planned task. So that helps us sleep a little better, rather than thinking I've got all these things to do, is if actually our brain can think, yeah, I've got all these things to do, but I know when I'm going to do them.
Bluma Zeigarnik was not known to us until we read your book. That was a lovely little Easter egg that you put in there, and thank you for it. It also shall go in the Frameworks library. There's going to be lots of little exhibits from Zena Everett. Oh, here's another lovely exhibit from your book, by the way, and like just pick this thread up if you want to say more. But ecstasy as the one of the kind of emotional results of a flow state. Ecstasy. Wow, standing outside yourself. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I did put in the book, I work with these organizations, going back to the baked potato machines and things. They say, oh, we've got all these games, we've got all these initiatives, we've got all these competitions. I think, hold on, just let people work in flow, make incremental progress towards their goals, as you said, but actually have all those wonderful, powerful cocktail of neurotransmitters from working in flow. And even better, so they've got the satisfaction of doing their work, but they have, this ecstatic feeling that you actually get when you're lost in a task. So what is it? Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, norepinephrine, anandamide, I don't get all of those at once any other way these days, apart from actually just getting work done. But I think the work has got so unnecessarily complicated. There was some great research done on teachers in the UK where they're making them do yoga. So they were making them lie on a cold school hall on an inset day, when there were no students in there. Obviously, there weren't any students in the classroom where the teachers were lying down doing yoga. But the teachers were saying, how is this helpful? Because I know I've got, all these emails piling up from parents and from, all sorts of regulatory bodies and all these kind of things. I'm lying down supposedly doing yoga when I should be actually just getting on with my work. And again, I think work would be much better if we just let people get on with the work as efficiently as possible and created the conditions for deep thinking. So we're not constantly switch off Teams. If Teams were switched off, I would, my income would be halved, because these constant distractions and interruptions and always on is just, it's cruel. It's ineffective. And it's cruel. And we know that productivity is going down, performance is going down, well-being is tanking. And I think the technology, which enables us to do this and is wonderful, really, truly wonderful and life-enhancing in so many ways, very easily tips into being misused.
Can I share a page from our notepad as a business that I think you'll probably just say amen to?
Yeah.
When the correct way to organize training for professionals is actually to take a look at exactly what they're supposed to do. Like if they have a well-written JD, then it's to look at the JD and say, what are you supposed to do here?
Yeah.
And then to go backwards and say, we're going to score you on doing the things that you're supposed to do and training you to do the things that you're supposed to do. This might sound like so dumb obvious that people are like, when's he going to get to the point about how to design learning? That's how you design learning.
Absolutely.
And actually what you tend to get is all kinds of other stuff. Like we're gonna have mindfulness in the workplace. It's like, well, I'm a junior account manager at an expert network firm. It's cool, but the whole time I'm in mindfulness at the King Workplace training, I'm wondering whether I should be scoring some goals in my work. And actually the right way to train it is, if that person's supposed to make calls to clients, you have a training called making calls to clients. And during that training, what they do to prove that they were able to is that they make calls to clients. And people like open like a tea flower, they're just so pleased with the ability to observe themselves winning. And it's really plain vanilla stuff.
Yeah, it's music to my ears, I know. Well, let's not just go on a moral discussion. You see, I think workplaces loading on so much unnecessary stuff onto people it's cruel. My mindfulness, I'll take care of that. I need my boss to set me clear goals and to write the job description. I don't need mindfulness if I have a good leader that inspires me. I signed up to this company motivated. Now you inspire me. The least you can do is give me that clarity. So I bet often when you say we'll start with the job descriptions and they go, oh, wait, what? Well, we haven't updated the job description. So there's all of that. But so I say to people, how long should it take them to do their job? So there are all these tasks that they need. Say they write that report every week. How long should it take? And we don't talk about time in that respect. We just squander it. So and we know about job crafting, that we all craft our jobs in different ways, but there are a certain amount of tasks that they should be absolutely clear how long it should take, as our manufacturing leaders would know. So I think that is the problem, that the job descriptions aren't clear, but there's no time attached to it. So we should say, we employ you for 30 hours a week. We've got 20 of those are for your core job task should take about 20, give or take, once you're trained by Kevin. And then we've got another 10 hours a week or so of curveballs. And then there's all this discretionary stuff you can get involved in. So then somebody should think, right, I've got time to do this because that is an interesting curveball. It gives me access to new skills or new networks, or it's fun, actually, so I'm going to do it. Or no, I've been invited to do that, but in fact, I'm operating at a lower level than I should do, and it's not giving me anything new. So no, thank you. Somebody else can pick that up. Why should I?
Mm.
But I work with people all the time and they say, yes, I've involved in this committee because I think it would look good for my career. And I say, when are you going to do that? When? You've already, and they say, I'm employed, I spend, I'm employed for 40 hours a week. My job takes about 50 hours a week. I've got somebody ill in my team, so I'm backfilling it because we don't get any resource. It's crazy. And then HR is saying, don't worry, we'll solve it. We've got a mindfulness person coming in. Now, so I do give mindfulness a bit of a kicking in the book because I think it's misused. Obviously, there's a lot to be said for mindful. I could do a lot more mindful eating, actually, rather than shoving in my dinners, but you don't need to hear about that. However, there's a time and a place for everything, but it's absolutely, we need to get those basics right. So job descriptions and allocating time to tasks. And I think people fear that's micromanaging. It's not, it's good leadership.
Yes. Another lovely author that sort of helped us kick off this series like 60 authors ago is Bruce Tulgan, and he talks about one-on-ones, and he gives very prescriptive details about like what a one-on-one is. He could have written that chapter, and I was like, I wonder if she knows Bruce because it's so close, but you guys would be very spiritually aligned on the tenets of that section. And he's a fan of ours, or sorry, we're a fan of his because we just couldn't agree more.
So what's his core message on 101s then?
His first core message is there is no over management epidemic. There's an under management epidemic.
Yeah.
Sort of premise one. Premise two, there's 4 or 5 kinds of caricatures of like bullshit lies that managers tell themselves, like I'll be laissez-faire and that's a real like honor, that's a real like honorable posture for me to take, is that it's like, hey, you guys need me, I'm here, and otherwise I'm not in your way. It's which is nonsense. It's actually dereliction of duty.
Yeah.
He has a few other characters like that. You do that a little bit too, where you have some sort of like classic caricatures of people that make errors. And then on the one-on-ones, he's got a way of charting it where you say, look, each person actually needs a slightly different configuration of a one-on-one because it turns out they're individual. The core substance of how you do it is the same, which is you think about, where am I going to have this? Am I going to have it at the office? If at the office, at the tea table, or in the small booking room, or at the big conference room, or at their desk, or at my desk, like think that answer through and pick it. Then pick the time. Is it lunch? Is it 3? Is it 8 a.m.? Whatever. And don't stumble into that, choose it. And then when you have the one-on-one, have it in a consistent way, but talk about the work. This is one of his sayings, talk about the work. It's like, talk about, something that seems like it's so obvious, but actually I've been a manager. It's quite tempting to drift into trying to be faux friendly or to talk about the big ideals. And you're like, what the hell did we have a one-on-one so you could talk about like the vision of the organization 10 years from now?
Yeah.
I need help. I need help on my pitches. So I love his frame.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that sounds spot on. You just reminded me, actually, I'm working with one leadership team, and one of them, only one, is in the office 3 days a week with her team. And she says, we all have lunch together. It's just easy. We're in the kitchen. We have, they've got a big kitchen. They bring their lunch in and they chat, and people come and go, and they talk about work. They talk about personal stuff. And she said, I don't need to have as many one-to-ones. And when I do, exactly that. Some of them I have to go into much more detail because they need that, they need some skills training, and so we're upping their competencies. Other people, I can just ask them one really good question, think about this, we've got a problem here, come back to me with an idea, we'll book in time. And she said, so she works with them all in different ways, but they have lunch together, like we used to do in ways. But rather than, whereas her peer group, some of them were all having this, every fortnight, 1 hour, 1-to-1, everybody's bored the pants off it. She's bored, they're bored, nothing's being achieved, and it's unnecessary. So yeah, that's what Headspace is for, actually thinking, right, let's just look at my org chart. Where do I need to hone in, and where do I need to elevate myself, rather than we just do this all the time. One-to-ones are a big area that people can cut right back on. But if you're all in the office, you know if someone's all right, and you can deal with it then and there.
Yeah. Zena, I've already kept you over 2 minutes. I knew that was going to happen. I knew as soon as you came on, we were gonna use up more of your time than we promised. People can find you just fine. I'm not going to ask you where people should go and find you. They should go and buy your book and just read it, or listen to it as I did.
Thank you.
And they should just find you on LinkedIn. Finding you isn't that tough. But once they do find you, what kinds of things are you most interested in doing? Do you want to work with individuals, teams? What kinds of individuals and teams?
Run crazy busy sessions in organizations to help them look at this kind of stuff, and it's a really nice way to have. I do them with leadership teams and all hands, and it's a really fun way for a team. I often get involved when they're having some away day and they've done a whole kickoff, this is our strategy, and people are looking there thinking, how have I got time for this when I haven't got time to actually do my job? So a crazy busy session will help them look at actually what gets in the way of achieving their priorities. And I make it fun because everybody thinks everybody else is coping much better than they are, which isn't true. But we're looking at spending more time on priorities and eliminating behaviors and habits that get in the way. So that's what I want. Loads of them everywhere, all over the world, Kevin.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Well, our patch is Prairies, Canada, and Southeast Asia, this major archipelago of all these wonderful islands and cultures here. So we will what's the old phrase? We will publish your name. That's what we'll do. Well, we love the book. It's a real pleasure to speak with you, and we'll share it with everyone.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. That was great fun. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Zena. Have a super day.